extremely good idea, and they give them about 20 milliseconds to get it across. Actually, I think it's about 90 seconds or something.
Right? 90-second pitch, and then if the pitch is received, they get 20 minutes or something.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, and that's great. Hello. No. Please join us.
We are live, but hop on.
So who is everyone here? I know you, Bernie, but I don't know everyone else.
My apologies. My lovely co-hosts, Julia Cameron.
Hello,
and
Julie.
Kate
Pleased
Love.
to meet you.
Love, yes.
And then we have
Kate Love.
Yes.
Great. Great
Lots
names.
of love.
Julie and Kate.
I love that part. Jay Pollock, that was a huge part. Like
Mhm.
he's a hero of mine, and I'm always quoting his electron theory and all of that every chance I get. And I thought it was so hilarious. Bernie, he got footage where Jerry is in a sauna, like zipped up in the hallway in the sauna, and Bob's talking to him, and then Bernie captures it and he goes, "Bob's taking a page out of my book where I like to corner them when they're cornered and tell them my theories." And it was so adorable. And it was like only that can happen, moments like that at Tesla Tech, where
Yeah.
Bob's talking to Jerry. Jerry's zipped up in a sauna, and Bernie's, pissing everyone off by filming it, like just doing
I
it.
gotta have a copy of that footage.
100%.
Oh
It's
my
all
God,
saved.
yes.
I will have it for you. And yeah, like we were
I just
saying-
wanted to talk to him actually,
Exactly.
and what I wanted to do is share an
you were
experiment.
offering money.
I wanted to offer money to do a control experiment, which is in line with things in the low energy nuclear reaction field and the understanding of Russia, the whole Russian community. That is a massive research program they've conducted since 2009 on these energy solitons, these charge clusters, basically static electricity, but in the neutral form. Well, it is neutral, and it can get bound into water somehow. And it can also lose its potency over a period of 2 days, and it can be re-energized by thermal light. And so it's a good fit for a completely different explanation, but it relies, in my view, on the presence of dissolved oxygen in the water. So I asked him after his lecture if he'd ever done an experiment using degassed water. And that was the question. And so I followed that up. I wanted to follow that up with my reasoning behind that, because I wanted to find out whether, because it looks like all of the things he's saying, like the transfer of information and all this kind of things, is what happens with energy solitons, charged clusters, exotic vacuum objects. There's been 1,000,001 erzions, radiant energy. There's been 1,000,001 names for them over the last century and a half. But they get bound to oxygen, it would appear. And so the test would be, you boil the water for a bit of time, remove all the gases, and then in a glove bag, which are very affordable, I mean, they're in the tens of dollars, you fill it up with nitrogen and you bubble nitrogen through it, so you get 100% nitrogen. Now, he showed a slide where it had water and a superconducting magnet, and the water parted. Now, the reason that happens is because water is diamagnetic, but also nitrogen is diamagnetic. So if you have nitrogen in there, then it still wants to move away from magnetic structures. Oxygen is not magnetic. Sorry, not diamagnetic, it's magnetic. In fact, it's uniquely paramagnetic. And so any type of north or south pole will be attracted to it and vice versa. And so these charge clusters have a magnetic structure to them, and they get bound to the oxygen. And there's this researcher, very famous, John Bockris, one of the world's greatest ever electrochemists, that was working down in Texas A&M University. And he was actually kind of like a colleague of Martin Fleischmann at times. And anyway, he did a replication of a Japanese researcher who invented the macrobiotic diet called George Osawa. And he had this process where he did carbon arc discharges underwater, and he synthesized iron. And what they found is that the amount of iron that was synthesized, if you look at the nuclear fusion reactions that would get to that iron from the elements that were in the initial reaction, it accounted for the increase in thermal temperature of the water over and above the electrical energy that was put in. But if they boiled the water and they saturated it with nitrogen, there was 0 iron production and 0 excess heat. If they boiled the water and put oxygen in there, the iron came back, the excess heat came back. And so the concept is that you need the oxygen. If you think about it, all life uses oxygen. All life. It doesn't matter whether you're a plant doing CO2 and H2O, or you're like us. We need O2 and H2O. And so in everything that's most important to life, O is a critical thing. And I think with plasmatic life, which is a self-organizing negentropic structure in its own right, like we are as living entities, it also needs oxygen as a tool. It's kind of like a catalyst. It's a path to. So I think it would be a very easy test to do. It would be very affordable. And so I just wanted a brief conversation with him in private. But he said, well, I'm going into this thing. And the guy offering him to go into the infrared bath said, oh, you can talk to him when he's in here. And I said, I'm thinking, I don't really want to do this, but he can't run away. So, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, so while we have you, because I know we got just a little bit of time before you have to take off, do you want to maybe give a brief overview of the work you've been doing in relating ancient artifacts and the encoded advanced information in it?
Well, firstly, I saw some ultrasound experiment in India. And to put it in context, I was a choir boy from the age of 5. So I grew up in a very old English church in my hometown. And so I saw all of the imagery of Christendom. I then, when I sung a much, much older cathedral in Chichester Cathedral, and that's like 11th century or something. And then I sung in St. Paul's, which is not so old, I don't think. But again, so I saw all of these kind of visual structures that are part of Christian iconography. Okay, so I had that in the back of my mind, and when I was studying art history in my A level, I chose the subject of Greek ceramics. And Greek ceramics, of course, are pre-Christian, many of them, and even contemporary with or before some of the Egyptian works. And of course, Greece ran Egypt for a while, so there was also some cross-correlation. So I actually made quite a few ceramics, but I studied when you actually had to physically go to the museums. And I got an early start on a deep love of visiting museums. I don't think anyone has got as much patience for staring at objects in museums as me. Certainly my wife and my kids haven't. They're in and out in an hour, and then they're sitting outside doing whatever for about 3 hours whilst they're patiently waiting for me to crawl around the museum. So I stare and I look and I think, why did ancient people, and what I found was, and this is this work, is that there was more consistency the older you go back. And so when I came to do this research, and I was told you need to look for neutrons, you need to look for gamma, you need to look for alpha and X-rays. These are all things that they don't have any structure in, that you can measure. They're just blips on an electronic device. And of course, the rumor in the field is that in most circumstances, these things are not present there. So you're being told to look for something so that you can prove that it does what they're telling you it should be doing, and it doesn't produce them. Therefore, you are not doing it. So they've set up the pit in which you can fall, right? Yeah. So I visited a nuclear scientist who discovered the nickel hydrogen energy system, which we've moved the name by popular vote from low energy nuclear reactions. It used to be called cold fusion, and that no one really liked that name, but certainly Pons and Fleischmann didn't. And then low energy nuclear reactions has been the name it's been called for a while, but recently we moved that to coherent energy transformations. And so that's where we are. Anyway, this guy, Francesco Piantelli, he discovered the nickel hydrogen system in a biological experiment. He was it's a fascinating experiment. He had the nickel rod, and he had a mouse cell that he was stimulating with electricity. And the idea was that they would flood it with hydrogen to start the death process in the mouse cell. And then at a particular point after the time of start of death, they would flood it with liquid helium, which is like 4 Kelvin. And it freezes the chemistry. And the idea was to learn what happens chemically as a brain cell dies, and then to find out chemicals that would be able to prevent the cell from dying. Because what it does, it puts up this barrier to survive, and after a while, the barrier is so strong that when the oxygen's then there, it can't switch back on again. And so the idea is to find chemistry so you can go to the top of the mountain, or so that, like, if you have a stroke, you don't die, or you don't lose so many limbs by having. Anyway, this experiment was going on whilst the Palo di Siena, this horse race, was going on outside, and essentially it started boiling 250 watts of cryogenic healing when cooling rather when the helium's coming through. And so he discovered nickel, hydrogen, somehow this is producing a vast amount of energy, and it's at full Kelvin, right? So this is literally cold fusion. And so we went to meet him, and he said, I remember very clearly, he said, don't tell nature what it is, let it show you. So from that point, I thought, okay, I'm not going to let me be guided by people that say, I have to find this for this to be valid. I'm just going to start looking under the microscope at what is going on, or in videos of experiments under operation. And what I kept on seeing is these things that look like ring solitons, like smoke rings, or like a smoke ring that's been trapped halfway into a surface with a vortex and an anti-vortex. Then I started seeing this thing that had like a tornado that was orthogonal to these parts, and then something going on down here. And then I started realizing that these were the same kind of things which are like the fleur-de-lis, which are like these imagery that is part of the Christian faith, but also part of Egyptian architecture. And I thought, oh my God, you've got the caduceus in there, you've got the yin yang, you've got the Maltese cross, you've got the swastika and its inverse, the salvistica, the swastika being the male, the salvistica being the female, that is the sun and the moon. And then I'm saying, oh my God, this is like alchemy. This is like, oh my, and then I lived in India prior to this for 8 years. And so I was seeing on all the Indian temples, all of their imagery. And so it was like, I was tooled up. And it wasn't just that. I'd already been doing 3-dimensional graphics for 20 years. So I could imagine anything as a 2D structure, but project it in my mind into 3D, but not only 3D, into fractal 3D, because I've been doing it for 20 years. And someone would send me a picture of a room or an object, and they'd say, right, this object, I want you to model this in 3D. And so I would have to find like a plug socket, which I know a dimension, and work out from the perspective how big all the dimensions were of the thing, so I could reverse engineer it. So when I see something as an impact of a process in a react as the result of a reaction, I can, in my head, work out in 3 dimensionals what that structure was that did the thing that you see under the microscope. And then it led me to see a particular structure from a researcher called John Hutchison, and in 3 different quantization levels. And for those that don't know about John Hutchison, he was messing around with Tesla gear and radio equipment, and
a whole lot of surplus army sonar and radar.
Yeah, so he was mixing everything together, and in 1979 he was able to levitate, cause metal samples and non-metallic samples to teleport into each other, to move around, to transmutate, to twist without cold, to glow without heat. So he was doing all of these things. And I realized that maybe what he was doing was something related to the process. So the project purchased some samples of him. I looked at the samples, and I found this amazing structure, which was fractal and so on. And then in our experiments, we saw these impact marks. Then I found out that this was the same thing that Winston Bostick was seeing when he was trying to convert the fusion technology to a domestic energy. In the so-called plasmoid, which is an abbreviation of plasma toroid work. And so it got down to the point where this must be the same thing, and it is the energy, it is the transmutation. And then we started seeing the collapse wave functions, these actual physically macro scale fractal structures that were in the products of the reactors. And I sent this to the Russians that I was working with, and they just threw in the towel. They said it was basically, yeah, we were doing this in classified work in the Soviet period. Here are the papers that were published after the Cold War was over. And these people were saying, I saw this classified information in the Moscow basement in 1988, and what they're going to do to me, the Soviet Union's collapse, so I'm just going to publish it anyway. And then I find out that this is now this fractal toroidal electrodynamics. It is able to manipulate matter at the root level, and so you do not need to consider the Coulombic barrier, because you have means by which you can cohere matter into a wavelet state. It becomes prima materia, and then when it gets born out of that back into a normal vacuum state, it is born as ordinary atoms, but not necessarily the atoms that went in. And it's beautiful, and that's what I had the pleasure of sharing here, a very small subset of the work that we've been able to do over the last 13 years. And it's been a real honor to do that.
And it's always an honor to have you on and around. So we're going to have to do this. You're coming back next year. I think everyone is coming back next year, and then we're going to have to add even more. But what you just said about that coherent matter and the avoiding the Coulomb barrier there, I'm not going to try to explain it right now, but you gave me a revelation in my mind of my own reinterpretation of the double slit experiments, and how a particle is made up of actual fields of coherent standing waves, not anything solid. You already know this. I said that earlier. You're like, of course, right? But that's just in my diagrams. What you said with the not breaking, needing to go through the Coulomb barrier is very relevant in that the waves don't scatter. They remain in these field states of it and then can reassemble.
Well, I mean, it's not the light double slit experiment that confuses people. It's the so-called particle, specifically free electrons going through. And I explain it like this. In Russia, they believe that the fundamental microelectron is an elementary LC dipole, which is a background neutrino, which is a cold neutrino. This is a superfluid that's at 1.97 Kelvin, universe-wide. It's a coherent condensate, and therefore it has one wave function universal-wide through all matter. And so if you put information in there, and because it has an anapole, which is a subset of the toroidal moment, it can instantly receive information, and the information is available all across the universe forever, instantaneously. There is no time delay. Then clusters of these structures form into a gel-like medium. And this is the gel over which light travels, which was the model for the ether over which light travels in the 1800s. And Tesla believed it till he died. He didn't believe the rest of the nonsense.
He knew it.
Yeah. So this gel-like medium. So that is what light travels. And in fact, there's this researcher called Anatoly Klimov, and he kind of found a similar thing that was found by another guy called Ivan Filimenko. So in the 1950s, Ivan Filimenko did a palladium deuterium boiling water reactor, the same kind of thing that was done by Pons and Fleischmann in 1989. He found that it emitted a type of radiation that would cause radioisotopes to decay. If they're beta isotopes, that means it must have been a neutrino-like emission from the reactor. He also found that the process allowed for a technology that would allow screening for radiation. And the radiation you care about is things like gamma and X-rays, which ionize and cause genetic decay or changes in your genetic makeup. Last year at the conference, in the Cold Nuclear Transmutation and Ball Lightning Conference in Russia, which I rebroadcast and translated, they had this plasma vortex reactor, which produces a COP of up to 10. And what they had is they had a couple of elements that combined to produce gamma rays. And they found that for 2 days after the experiment ran, the gamma ray count from these devices went massively down, which means something is removed from the local environment around the apparatus that prevents the passage of gamma rays. And what is that? Well, if the gel has been captured from the local environment around the reactor, it doesn't have the wobbly stuff over which the photons can travel. It doesn't have a medium over which it can travel. You can still see other photons because they're on different quanta. So the double slit experiment explained from the electrons have a toroidal moment. They get fired through, and an electron in a vacuum still decelerates. It doesn't go on for infinity. Why is it decelerating? It's losing energy. Why is it losing energy? Because it's moving through a medium that is the medium that is over which light travels. If it's losing energy through that medium, it must be therefore doing an analog to the Bremsstrahlung radiation, the breaking radiation, which means it's creating photons, and the photons will then produce the interference bands. So it is a particle, and the particle losing its kinetic energy creates photons in the medium that produce the interference band.
that actually makes sense. Although the full understanding, I'm gonna have to watch this like
It's
5
just a
times
riff.
over, but I love
You know, I was watching you explaining it last night, and I thought, I've got another idea, and I might be wrong.
Right, but that's,
So what?
that's what
I'm
this
going to
is
throw
all
it out
about,
there.
right?
So there you go. There's the other idea.
Right, but that's what it's all about. That's what makes stuff like Tesla Tech so great, is that there's no judgment. It's an open, safe space of sharing ideas, just putting it out there, not fearing ridicule, but then actually having a peer review of everyone else's thoughts. And that even if one idea, like my idea, is wrong, if it triggers something better in your own, it's like, hey, you're still contributing to a bigger breakthrough.
The passion everyone has, like you just feel it in the heart of like they're here, you're genuinely passionate, and so ultimately it's like, hey, well, I was wrong. Well, I'm still really heavily inspired by this entire field.
I think one of the, if I have it correct, the reaction that you're experiencing in your experiments is tying us to something deeper, right? Like the ether.
Absolutely. So, like, a lot of people want to understand how the 100 monkeys effect occurs, how the morphic resonance. Well, I say your DNA is a cryptographic key to the makeup of your brain. Your brain manifests as a transceiver that is able to interact with the Akashic record.
Yes.
Okay. And they found in 2023 in Sydney Technical University that their subjects doing cognitive tasks in a conscious state using functional magnetic resonance imaging of the brain, which shows oxygenated blood diamagnetic, deoxygenated blood paramagnetic. They showed magnetic vortices and magnetic antivortices. And that is the minimum requirement for a toroidal moment, which means 100% certainly a functioning conscious brain in a cognitive state is producing toroidal moments. The toroidal moments will be based on their microtubules in the neurons, and those are all defined by their DNA. So the transceiver is a manifestation at the macro level of your DNA, which is your cryptographic key. So if you can imagine you have a thought, and that thought is written into the superfluid using the toroidal moment into the etheric, the superfluid universe-wide one-wave function. That thought is there. The twin has the same cryptographic key. Now, nature, nurture, their particular transceiver won't be perfectly the same, and you're out of phase when your consciousness switches on at a different time in the morning or even at the point of birth. And so you're slightly out of phase, but they're most likely to receive your information. Then your mother and your father, then your other siblings, and then your bloodline. So you can receive information. It also means that you can be reincarnated. So if your cryptographic key is reminted, like, so a new spirit would be a DNA that's never occurred at any point in the universe at any point in time. When the same DNA is minted again, that is reincarnation. Okay, so you regain access to the Akashic record, and you might have the experience of a past life. Now, it might have been on a completely different planet when you were a water creature and you lived under the water, and it's like you can't reference to where you are right now. Now, I've been seeking an audience, and I have a person that's trying to get me an audience with Rupert Sheldrake to talk about my ideas, to explain his morphic resonance. And essentially, it's this. You have your Q factor here, which is your read-write to the Akashic record.
Yes.
Someone over has here their read-write access to the Akashic record, but you always have, like on an AM radio, you can start to hear the radio station before you get to the actual frequency, which is in tune. And if you can imagine you have a sideband where you can start to sort of see the information, and another one over here, another one over here, the more people that start to think about it, and understand it, then after a while, everyone will pick up the information because their Akashic record access has already receiving the sidebands of everyone that already understands the technology. Or the understanding.
So the Akashic record, because I do a lot of work with the Akashic record.
Right.
And I know that this is a record.
Into the mic.
This is a record of every lifetime I've ever lived, every
Yeah.
breath I've ever taken.
Of course.
And you're saying that is also connected to the DNA.
Yes. Your
Awesome.
DNA is a coil of a coil of a coil of coil. It itself is a toroidal moment-based structure. In fact, Geverbliss who wrote the paper in the Biology of Life journal, Russian journal in 1995, explaining this and revealing this to the public, was invited into the Moscow basement in 1988 to be shown this electrodynamic system, because he was trying to create an electrodynamic system to manipulate people's DNA.
Wow. Okay.
And this is also a tool where you can manipulate people's consciousness. And the weird thing is, modern 5G antennas use toroidal moments for their communication.
Now, do you think this could actually interfere in the Akashic? I mean, because
Yes.
the Akashic, you do what you believe that.
So my big concern is that your cryptographic key can be reverse engineered if a number of your family members hand over their DNA. They can get quite close, which means they have a key that they can put into a quantum computer and control you at any point in space and time.
And
they can
like
also
that.
rewrite your Akashic record.
Okay.
Which means they can do a Mandela effect on you. They can literally remove your memories from past lives.
So keep your DNA safe.
Keep your DNA is the ultimate thing you should never let anyone touch.
And in 1 gram of DNA can store up to 455 exabytes of data. And that, like, data storage, there's so much information like inside of us. But I also love the beautiful information of our cerebral spinal fluid spins, like, 2 streams around a 3rd ventricle, and same with our heart. Like, I used to think that there's a bloodstream, like the blood flow in the heart was just like this steady stream. The fact that it spins like that, and you see that in nature, and I think that's why Moray, like, I vibe so hard with him and everything, how he looks to that, like, divine. That's in everything, that original design.
Yeah, I mean, the spin is inherent in all of nature, because, like, the moon is spinning around us, we're spinning around the sun is spinning around the center of our galaxy, the galaxy is spinning around something for sure. So there's no straight lines in reality because everything is in motion.
Did you just use Terrence's line?
No, this is well known. This is well known. Yeah, it's not.
Oh, but this is controversial. What I will say is,
I like controversy.
This is controversial. Terrence said last night that Nikola Tesla, he quoted the famous Nikola Tesla quote, which is, nature, the 369 quote. Mm-hmm. Tesla never said that. And me and Bernie argue about it because Jason Verbelli was the one to basically be like, no, Julia, I cannot find it anywhere. And so I was like, I would take that out. But the John Keeley information, what he says about 369 is beautiful, and maybe they took it from that. But
I have to appreciate the delivery he gave. It was very compelling in terms of his delivery, and it's a very actor thing. And I like the way that I think that he had rehearsed what he wanted to say a lot. Having been on stage from the age of 5, and I've done a stage play, a No Coward play, where if I said my lines only back to back, it took 50 minutes if I was speaking at the speed I speak, right? And you can imagine that's a lot of words to learn, right? And you learn to do that as an actor. You learn to get the exact words in a particular sequence. Now, you might, if someone does something that's not correct in their lines, you have to riff on it, and you have to bring the story back to where it should be. So sometimes you have to do improv. But what I was looking at is, and I liked his delivery because he had a whole series of AI images and inspirational images going on the screen, and they were appropriate to where he was in his script.
Exactly, it was time.
Yeah, and I thought that's actually that is, he made a movie. Now, whether the movie is correct, that's a different question. So, but interesting, it was for me a compelling experience I hadn't seen being done before. This putative scientific concept being given across as a filmic lecture with a backdrop, which was a sequence of images that then blended into some equations and stuff. It's the first time. So I have to give him full credit, not necessarily on the information, but on the actual delivery. He's a perfect person for when he's actually got something really good to say, to actually deliver it in a way that would be compelling.
I think it's needed too, because then it can help make these topics mainstream, and people, we need more awareness of it. To it.
Right. So it's like it's an awesome presentation. He does include, like, so the first like 3/4 was all like the geometry videos and stuff like you're describing, and then at the very end he did go over some equations and put some actual mathematics into it. But it's that regardless, it's a beautiful presentation.
Yeah.
It's bringing awareness into this field,
Yeah.
and by attending Tesla Tech, it's then bringing more attention in. But it's not just to him then, it's bringing it to, and that both Dr. Yu and Terrence were saying, to be a part of this community.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that it's like they're not just trying to sell their own ideas, they're bringing
Yeah.
people into the discussion.
I mean, and I hope it allows them to grow as individuals, because what I found when I came into the cold fusion field, I didn't know anything about whose theory was correct. But what I could see immediately is there were systems in solid state, in liquid state, in gaseous state, and plasma state, which had all different selection of theories. However, they were all seeing the same products, right? So how can a theory that only relies on something being in the solid state, and it relies on it being in the solid state, can produce the same products as something in the plasma state? You know, obviously the theory is wrong, but what you've seen is real. And so Dr. Yu presented some things that are obviously real, right? In terms of physical presentations, but his interpretation may be wrong. My interpretation was completely wrong in many respects to the things that I saw as I started on my journey in the field of what was then called low energy nuclear reactions. We're calling coherent energy transformations now. That may be true of Terrence. And it's very unlikely that any individual or group of individuals will instantly have the entire answer to the entire universe. And what I like about certain people, you know what I mean? Is that no one gets stuff right first time. Like
nobody's God. Right?
And so people say, why are you saying this in your video 8 years ago? I said, well, you know what? I couldn't I couldn't run before I could walk, and I couldn't walk before I could crawl. And that's my answer, right? And so the thing is, I like the fact that the people are thinking and they're putting the ideas out there. And I could even see a change in Dr. Yu's concepts, even with his interactions at this conference.
That's right. That's
and that is the beauty. And so what I did when I heard Piantelli tell me that in 2015, don't tell nature what it is, let it show you, is I realized that nature cannot lie. It doesn't have an agenda. It doesn't have a IP to sell, a book to promote. It doesn't have a video that they want to sell as well. Nature just is. It's brutal, actually. Nature brutal will do what it wants to do, and only what it wants to do. It's brutal. It'll do exactly what it wants to do, given a set of parameters. And if you give it exactly the same parameters, it will do exactly the same thing. And that is truth. That is empirical truth. It's incontrovertible proof. Now, you may interpret it wrongly. So my challenge to Dr. Yu and to Terrence is the same thing that I gave to myself. If I cannot predict, based on what I've already seen nature do repeatedly, an outcome from a set of input parameters, then what my idea is wrong. I'm wrong. I know I'm fallible, but I'm empirically wrong. So when someone comes to me and they say, I've got this great idea and it's doing all this, I said, what evidence do you have? Well, I just know it is. And I've got a few testimonies that say it does this. And it's like, testimonies?
About tests.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I'm brutal with people because I've been brutal with myself, and I come out here and I put the ideas out, and I want people to be brutal. When I was on stage, I didn't want the sycophants to come up and say, "Oh, you're so amazing! Oh, it's the best performance I've seen." I don't want any of that. I want people to come up and say, "You said that, and it's interesting, but I think you're wrong, and this is why." They're the people that I really want to spend time with me, the people that challenge, and I do that for other people, whether they like it or not.
You hear that, Bernie? He's doing it with love for you, Bernie.
Without it, we don't have it.
And that's why you need the dialectic.
Because you can't just have a yes man. Real science is that you have to put something out that's repeatable that other people can do, and or if it's being developed while you're still like coming up with the understanding and fully of it, it's that you be able to have these pieces that, okay, it does this, this, and this, so it should then do this, and that you come up with an experiment that predicts
Yeah.
what it's going to do, and that you have to be able to put yourself out there, and that you'll have enough understanding of your thesis when you're able to come out with these predictions of tests, put it out there, and be comfortable doing that like you're now.
Yeah, so like it got to the point where I could say to my colleague in California, I believe that if you go and get your ultrasonic cleaner and you buy some relatively thick aluminium foil, you run it for as long as you're willing to do, and then with water, and you take some material that you magnetically collect from the bottom of the cell and put it under your SEM, you will see micrometric sized iron-rich crenellated microspheres. And that experiment had never been done. And 100% first time it was there, and repeatedly. So, and then
Jeremiah repeated that experiment.
There we go. And then I in 2022, I said, look, the fractal toroidal moment, which is called hypertoroidal moment in the West and supertoroidal moment in Russia, I said that the fractal toroidal moment produces an apple shape based on mathematics designed for memory storage in next generation computer technology. And I showed the image in my ultrasound-based presentation in Azizi, and I predicted that these structures would be found. And then in 29th of December 2023, I was giving some detritus from the heat-producing reactor in Taipei. I looked at it 3 months later, and these exact structures are found in thousands and thousands of cases. So I've got to the point now where I can predict things so well with this understanding that have never been observed. You put the image that you found on Google, there's nothing out there in the literature in any paper that's ever existed, but I predicted that it would occur if you just bothered to look in the experiment which should be doing it. Right, so it's got to that point, and so now I'm in the Alchemy of Prague. We're going to be running in the third week in September, which you should come to.
I need to. So everyone buy Tesla Tech online and use Bob's affiliate link, but no, I got to use mine so I can go.
Anyway, so we're going to be doing several experiments. Like we're going to have a sapphire experiment analog people can actually witness. We've got these ultrasound experiments people can actually do. We're going to do the Matsumoto lead wire, 3 80 millisecond pulses of 110 volt AC, 60 hertz, which synthesizes new elements. And we're going to do one that no one has ever done before. And I have no idea, other than my intuition based on my understanding, that if we take a tungsten rod and a copper plate, we will not touch it. The tungsten rod will be looked at under the SEM by the participants. They will see what's there, which will probably be some oxide and carbon contamination on the tungsten. The copper plate will be at copper, typically with some contamination of phosphorus maybe in the copper and some carbon and oxygen. Then they will put it into the Dragon Arc discharge. They will hold the copper plate. Someone will bring along some deionized water, spray it in the local environment, do the Dragon discharges. I predict when they put that under the SEM, they will see synthesis of calcium. And I publicly said that in my presentation, and I've never done that experiment before. So I've got to the point of not suggesting it internally and then revealing the results that
You setting that intention, it affects the outcome.
Well,
Manifesting, right?
maybe, but I'm not saying it without any understanding. So when we took
calculated.
So when we took a Marsa gas and we put it on a tungsten welding rod in 2019 in Japan, a Marsa gas is an advanced form of HHO, and a lot of low energy nuclear reactions that we're now calling coherent energy transformations, they tend to produce calcium, and in this case, every single analyzed spot of changed material had calcium in it. So this is an educated guess based on experiment that's been repeated over the past. In fact, many systems in LENR tend to produce calcium. In the tungsten, there will be no calcium. In the air, there's no calcium. In the deionized water, there's no calcium. And in the copper, there's no calcium. So if we see calcium in the impact mark, it will be synthesized in the tungsten. If it's on the tungsten, that's where it's synthesized. And it's carried by the arc and the EVOs up to and deposited on the copper. And that, for me, would be utterly conclusive. And it will be the first time in history that Joe Blow or whatever comes off the street, he participates in an experiment that's never been conducted before and sees elemental transmutation.
Oh, how do they get tickets? How do people get tickets to attend?
If you go to my blog, or maybe Bernie can hit you up with a link
Yeah, I'll add it to the description.
to the description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we'd love
You
love to
just
attend.
blew my mind though with the calcium aspect, because it's like in my presentation and like thesis, I was saying the calcium state of the alchemist has got to be like a hydride or oxide, but now I'm like speculating maybe there could be actual transmutations of calcium.
Calcium is interesting because it is the last element that is purely alpha conjugate nuclei. That is to say, it's dec alpha, it's 10 alpha particles. And alpha is the highest binding energy for a cluster that is part of elements. And in many linear experiments and many high energy, excess energy experiments, going back to the early Russian patents and so forth, you get these alpha conjugate nuclei forming, and it's the last of the chain.
Well, that makes sense to my mind. I get what you're saying. So another thing I had brought up, and I'm glad it was me and I didn't, that poor David didn't go up himself and asking that. But you said, and he said that he sent you this sample of the translucent silver, but in your test, it came back as silver chlorine. Is that correct?
It came back with whatever's already in the literature for transparent silver.
Okay.
So he had replicated what had already been known in the literature, and I verified that the literature was correct.
Fair. So if just from his story, he was saying, or hung up on saying, I guess he must have misunderstood what you had told him, but he thought you had said that you had tested it under a mass spectrometer, and that
No, I tested it
silver.
under SEM. You could clearly see the areas which were transparent were, I think it was kind of like an oxide or chloride or something. And what I don't remember what it was, but it's what is in the literature for transparent silver.
Okay, I got you. So you.
Yeah. So there's the ordinary elements, it's chemical change to it. It actually changes its physical properties. It becomes brittle and so forth. Yeah. And it's a known thing already known to exist.
For sure. It was the misunderstanding was that you didn't actually do a physical test that showed chlorine in it. Was what he thought you were saying. It was
no.
You pulled it out of the literature. Then
No. Firstly, I put it under SEM, and then I found out that it was whatever a compound it was, which is a chemical compound, and then I looked in the literature and found that was already known.
Okay, so his question is then, where did the chlorine compound come from? Because he hasn't told me his method, so I don't know.
I need to revisit. Exactly. It was several years ago, because it was nothing really very interesting. I had
fair enough, right? Because you got a million things. I get that.
I love this field of like, this is the beef. You know what I mean? Like,
no, it's just science, and it's trying to understand everything, right?
Yeah.
And so it was the one thing that might make it relevant is if chlorine actually showed up and he wasn't actually using any chlorine, that it might have been a transmutation into chlorine is the only.
I mean, there's always instances.
But reproduce it a bunch of times and then make it, and then it's like then.
Yeah, but the idea of calling it transparent silver is incorrect because it's a transparent silver compound.
Okay.
It's not silver. It's a chemical that actually happens to be silver. Like you can get alumina, which is like white, completely opaque, but you can get sapphire, which is exactly the same elements in a different arrangement, and there's no extra elements in there, but it's some of the most clear stuff to all forms of photons. UV can go for it. In fact, if you've got a mobile phone, and I imagine many of the audience have got mobile phones, it seems to be some people have. Typically, they have a sapphire window, which is very, very hard. It's one of the hardest, most hardness that you can have over the lens of their camera. But I'm being told by my boss over there that I need to leave. So is there any general questions that you would like to ask?
I just had a quick, but I wanted to know about, he mentioned you have something to do with remote viewing. And so.
Yeah, so I didn't realize that some of the things that I've been doing all my life since I could have my earliest memories was something akin to remote viewing. And I didn't know it had a name. I just thought it was clairvoyance. But so in my work in recent decade, I know that I cannot hold on to anything and keep any secrets because I know I can reach into the Akashic record and to people's brains and rip out the answer to the question I want. So who am I to try and hold that back from anyone else? And by the way, it's only my ego that's doing that, and I can't hold it back because there's people that can do what I can do. So like, so the point is like I've been very honest for many years that I do not believe I'm inventing anything. I'm receiving the information, and I'm just a conduit to try and concatenate it all, aggregate that information, and synthesize an argument to help others to understand mysteries that have hitherto not been understood very well. And I've known that I would need to do that starting in my 40s since I was about 7 years old. So I had these recurring dreams, and it was not a nightmare, but it woke me up over and over and over again for years and years, that I would start something and have to do something in my 40s, and I wouldn't get paid for it. I'd be ridiculed. It would be extremely hard to do, and so forth. But I had to do it, and I had no choice. Moreover, I had to learn everything I could possibly learn about absolutely anything in order to be ready for my job. And I've known that since as early as my real consciousness switched on, which typically, according to the Jewish faith, if, you give me your boy and I'll hand you back your man at 7. That is when you basically start switching on as a conscious entity. So from the start of my being a conscious entity and remembering anything, it might have been happening before there, but 7 is the switch on point for me of remembering that I had this recurring dream. I knew I had to do a job in this cycle of this incarnation, and on a few days after my 40th birthday, the project was founded, and we set off to work.
And what is what do you do?
The Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, which was named after Martin Fleischmann, who died 3 weeks before the conference where we went to find. And I just wanted more children, and because I had bought into the world is ending, the global warming nonsense, which I believed since as early as I can remember, I wanted a solution so that I didn't feel guilty about having more children, bringing them into a world. Because as a parent, when you bring a child into the world, you owe them absolutely everything. They don't owe you a thing. They can be as rude as they like to you, but you owe them everything because you punish them with existence, right? So you have total responsibility. Some parents don't get that. I don't know why, but for me, you have total responsibility for the child. And I need to know that there was a solution. So I went to this conference, and even within the time of the conference, I'd seen enough at the conference to realize all of these people who were brilliant professionals, they were definitely seeing something, and it is the solution, but they haven't quite got it in a means by which it can be delivered. Let's see if we can do that.
Amazing.
Yes.
I guess we should.
We
let
should,
you go,
because
end it
I'm
on that.
going to be in
Yes,
trouble.
Exactly.
I won't have a higher class.
We want you to make it back here in 1 year's time. So thank you so much, Bob. We appreciate you, and thank you for making the time.
Let's go right now. Yeah. I'd love to connect with you on the Akashic Records and your work with that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
That's amazing. So
It's not that I worked on it long. It's just I saw this shell break thing, and I understand about the relic neutrinos, and I just thought, that'll work.
well, it is. Definitely.
Yeah. I needed something also because I've been searching for an explanation for the remote viewing.
Yes.
And for remote viewing, everything had all time and space has to be connected. So there has to be a medium by which that happens. And the relic neutrino condensate is a real mainstream science thing that exists.
Yes.
And if it shares one wave function, there needed to be a way where you can interact with that. As a superfluid, the vibrations that you insert into it exist for all time. And so what is the mechanism by which you can interact with that? It turns out it's the toroidal moment. And I've been saying that for years. And then this Sydney Technical University on June the 15th, 2023, showed not that they knew it was producing a toroidal moment, but it is producing a toroidal moment. And they had a complete answer, which is consistent with absolutely everything. And so I could understand.
That
I'm
just
gonna
explains.
digress because I know
Yeah, we need to wrap it up.
Yeah.
You've got to go.
So thank you very much for your time.
Yes,
Thank you.
so much.
And your
Thank
time.
you, the whole Greenyer family for this time, and
Yes.
now go enjoy your trip.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you.